Happy World Voice Day 2025. I am so excited to be sharing this information session with you on Empower Your Voice. So in honor of World Voice Day, I wrote a little something and I do hope you enjoy. What is a voice? A voice is the only God-made musical instrument. Everyone indeed has their own unique print. This is an irreplaceable gift and ultimate privilege, to handle with care and share with each village. Do what you can to empower a voice, then let it be so, dear God, that all may rejoice. So before we continue, I'd like to introduce myself and give you a little bit of background and a little bit of a foretaste of what you might experience today. I'm so thankful for the amazing gift to have a voice, and for that I praise God. I'm a South African born, Afrikaner, my mother tongue is Afrikaans. I'm a classically trained singer, a soprano. I'm a singing voice pedagogue and a vocalist in training. So I've taught applied voice and vocal pedagogy at a university in South Africa since 2016. And I'm so passionate about helping students discover their unique voices in creative ways. So this presentation stems from my doctoral research, and it explores interventions that I use during one-on-one singing lessons. So on the agenda for today is a little bit about World Voice Day in general, a little bit about this year's World Voice Day, and then diving into empowering the singing voice specifically, which is the focus of this information session. We will have a look at SOVT exercises, kinesthetic singing tools, combined SOVTEs and kinesthetic singing tools, and then a quick summary of what you can do with this. Now you might be wondering, who's World Voice Day for anyways? Only professional voice users? No, it's anyone in the singing and voice community, specifically school teachers, singers, vocal coaches, conductors, actors, voiceover artists, and many more. So essentially, it's any professional voice user, but actually it's any voice user, because we only have one voice and it is such a special gift that we really need to take care of it. So this is for anyone. Now, what is the goal of World Voice Day? I would say the goal is awareness. We have to become aware of vocal health and the impact of allergies, hydration, reflux, medicine, hormones, humidity, and a whole long list of things on the voice. We also have to understand and appreciate the essential role of the voice in our daily lives. We communicate and we share so much information with the quality and the intention behind our voices. Therefore, it's really important to practice daily voice care. Now, World Voice Day is also about raising awareness in order to prevent voice disorders. But it is also a moment to reflect on those who do struggle with voice disorders. Certain terms come to mind, such as atrophy, dysphonia, vocal fold paralysis, nodules, polyps, hoarseness, and much more. Now, most of these disorders can be treated by rehabilitation through voice or speech therapy, but the aim is to work on habilitation, so essentially an aspect of vocology. But what this means is we want to work on caring for our voices while they are still healthy, to keep them healthy, so that we can use them better and longer. Now, I have a question for you with regards to the theme of this year's World Voice Day. how do you empower a student's voice during singing voice training? Is this something that you have even thought about? And what does it mean to you? How do you empower a student's voice during a singing lesson, for example? So I'll answer that question by telling you how I do it. First of all, so important, I prioritize self-discovery through creativity versus a master-apprentice approach. So in other words, I try and lead a student to find the correct answer or to find a new sensation instead of demonstrating and having them copy and imitate my sound. So I believe that there are two sides of the empowerment coin, namely encouraging and equipping. What I mean with this is that we have to encourage someone to let their voice be heard. And in the voice studio, this looks like we have to encourage a collaborative effort. So we have to make music and we have to teach with our students, not just at our students, but we have to ask questions and we have to teach them in accordance with the basics of vocal pedagogy. We can't just say, okay, sing the song, but we have to be intentional. But we also have to encourage students to discover their own voices. Then we have to equip students with creative interventions that involve the entire body, out-of-the-box uses of consonants, and perhaps physical exercise equipment. You might be wondering why a singing voice should be empowered. Well, empowering the voice has to do with equipping your student with strategies to facilitate freedom in vocal production and spontaneity in artistic expression. So once your students are not held back by deficiency in vocal technique, it's so much more effortless and sincere to arrive at artistic expression. And that is what we aim to do to empower a singing voice, is to equip the student so that there's freedom in vocal production and spontaneity in artistic expression. But how could a singing voice be empowered, you might ask? And this is where interventions from speech-language pathology are really, really interesting and useful. However, there is a disclaimer. The exercises in this presentation can be applied only if you have a singing student who does not have a voice disorder or a vocal pathology. So this is assuming you have a healthy voice in front of you. And this can be recognized by listening to the tone quality and the flexibility in the voice, which is something that you as a voice teacher should always listen for. But it is also essential to have a combined approach to teaching singing, which includes consulting with speech-language pathologists. When you notice that something is off in your singer's voice, you might want to call in some extra advice. So there are two types of interventions that I will be discussing today: SOVT exercises and kinesthetic singing tools. So, why these types of interventions? Not just because I like them a lot, but because I have found that they work very effectively. And the research has also shown this. So, they can release inhibitions through silliness. I mean, if you have to ask a student to then it does release a little bit of the inhibitions. It engages the entire body, so it's not just an act of the throat, which is really important. It engages the pelvic floor instead of only extrinsic laryngeal muscle activation, which is so often the case in young singers, but also this can happen to any singer. Now, these types of interventions could reduce tension in the articulators, and they could advance free and unrestricted phonation, which is something that we like very much. It can also improve breath flow and breath energy, essentially improving breath management. And these interventions could target specific aspects of vocal technique. Now, I am talking from a classical singing perspective today, but many of these areas could be applied to other styles of singing as well. Now, which elements of technique may be addressed? Phonation. We can work on onset and release exercises or coordination between airflow and vocal fold vibration with all of these SOVT and kinesthetic exercises. We can work on breath management. So we'll work on how to let the breath flow and how to generate the appropriate type of breath energy. Then we can also work on articulation by releasing tension and increasing agility in the articulators themselves. Resonance is an important aspect that is very often addressed through these interventions. We look at resonance balancing and specifically consistent timbre or tone quality. Then we also look at registration, which is one of the more fun areas where SOVT exercises and kinesthetic tools can be implemented. We try to achieve smooth transitions between registers and balance the breath energy from low to high notes or high to low notes. Now we get to the really fun part. So, SOVT stands for Semi-Occluded Vocal Tract Exercises, or SOVTs. They're used to rehabilitate injured voices or to improve well-functioning speaking and singing voices, which is the habilitation aspect. They're used in a lot of disciplines. So they're used from voice therapy, through singing, to physical therapy. I've met a physio that uses those party whistles that make for explaining to patients about certain breath management principles. And this is definitely also a way to use semi-occluded vocal tract exercises. So how does this work? In short, the vocal folds require air pressure from the lungs to be put into motion. This is called subglottic air pressure. When you sing with an open mouth, the vocal folds have to resist the subglottic pressure. But when you sing with a partially closed mouth, in other words, semi-occluded, or a semi-occlusion somewhere in the vocal tract, the air pressure that comes from below the vocal folds reflect back from the mouth to the vocal folds, allowing the vocal folds to be positioned in a much more effective and healthy and easy position for sound production. It is essentially like doing stretches in a pool. So this helps you a lot in the voice studio because the vocal folds can stretch for higher pitches without more breath energy or hyperreduction, potentially causing strain in the voice. And they can also be used for warm-up and cool-down exercises. But there is a warning by Reagan. If singers have insufficient vocal fold closure, SOVT exercises might not be ideal. So, always be super mindful and focus on the sensations that you feel and ask your student, what is it you are experiencing when you're doing this exercise? You can have a look at Maxfield et al. 2015, where they investigate the types of pressures that different occlusions present. Now, as part of my doctoral research, I have grouped SOVT exercises into 3 categories, namely straw phonation, articulatory trills, and consonants as SOVTs. Now, I really want to encourage you to try out these exercises, but safety first, make sure that you consult with your singing teacher to ask, does this exercise do me any good, or should I rather try something else or avoid this exercise completely? So when you do these exercises, always aim for the following: flow, clarity, ease, and flexibility. So let's dive into straw phonation. So how do you do this? So you grab a straw. Any drinking straw should be fine, but you can also use the metal straws. I would prefer to use paper straws, but just make sure that you do moisten them a little bit, otherwise a part of your lip will stick to your straw. Not pleasant, and you only make that mistake once. So when you start with straw phonation, make sure that your breath is flowing constantly. And that the breath is not escaping through the nose. So you can plug the nose to make sure that the breath is only coming out through the straw. Now you can add some pitch to this and make it vibrate. Feel the vibrations, and that is what you have to focus on. So it's really as simple as that. Now the type of straw that you will use depends on what you need. You can use a little bit of a thicker straw, a wider straw or a thinner straw. It depends on what feels well for you. So always be mindful and be aware of what you do. And remember, aim for flow, clarity, ease, and flexibility in the voice when you do any of these exercises. So note, very important, straw phonation facilitates continuous breath flow and phonation more than other SOVTs. So it's really worth investigating this in the voice studio. So what could you do with the straw? So you can switch the voice on and off. And this is something that I learned from a YouTube channel by Katarina Hornakova. Very, very valuable. So you can start with just letting the breath flow, but then adding pitch, stopping pitch, adding pitch, stopping pitch. This is really good for vocal fold closure and for learning onset and release. Then you can do pitched glides or sirens, or you can do intervals. And this is really helpful for smooth register transitions. Now you can really have a look at Ingo Tietze. His work with the straw and his work with vocology in general is absolutely fantastic. Highly recommended. So, how do you transition this into your repertoire? I usually suggest to my students that you start with straw phonation, then transition to another semi-occlusion, z, and then release on a vowel. So it would be something like this. And who knows, it might just work. Now, if you don't find a straw, puffy cheeks, what's also called blowfish, is an alternative to straw phonation, and this is used by Chapman and Manternach. So puffy cheeks is very simple. So you puff your cheeks, you keep the air between the lips and the teeth, and then you phonate. Now the key for straw phonation or puffy cheeks or blowfish is to not make a huge loud sound, but rather feel a very vibracious and resonant sound. Next on the agenda is articulatory trills. So these are your very commonly used tongue trills, lip trills, and a raspberry. So a tongue trill is essentially a rolled R, where you do a lip trill is where you do almost like a BR. Or now this is very interesting because I find that there are two ways to do this. One, you can either keep your tongue quite flat, or you can have the tongue raised to the roof of the mouth. The first with a flat tongue is slightly more difficult. Maybe it's just me. But I find that it's a more direct connection with the voice. Tongue to the roof of the mouth. Where the second one, the roof of the mouth one, has a little bit more space in the mouth. So experiment and see what works for you and your students. Now the raspberry is probably my favorite one. In Afrikaans, it's called framboos. So this means you have your tongue through your lips and you're doing a tongue trill and a lip trill simultaneously. Essentially, just think about sticking your tongue out to someone as if you're a little child. But be careful, this is a spit generator. Now you can use all of these for warming up, to relieve tension, and continuous airflow. But what's interesting about these exercises is that you also have the appropriate abdominal muscle activation when you sustain these sounds. You don't even have to think about it. It just generates energy. So it's really, really helpful. But be careful. Some students cannot do these exercises, whether it's a lack of air or airflow or a speech deficit, especially with the r. If this is the case, yes, there are interventions such as substituting the r with a d and then practicing put it out, 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 put it out. But a speech language pathologist might have to be consulted, or you have to refer your student to one of them. It's really important to know when to refer. So, consonants as SOVTs. Now, general thoughts. This is probably Richard Miller's most famous technique. He's famous for many things, but this is something that I really, really enjoy about his writing, is how he uses pilot consonants to target specific technical challenges or aspects of vocal technique. Now, a consonant isn't normally thought of as an occlusion, but it is actually a semi-occlusion. It's also important to alternate between unvoiced and voiced consonants, as well as stopped and continued consonants, so that you can target the specific technical ailment. Now, when you think about voice therapy or taking it a step back, going from an unvoiced to a voiced consonant is exceptionally useful to practice vocal fold closure in an undemanding context. So, for example, you can use z, 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 or f, and this is similar to the accent method mentioned by Chapman, but what this also causes is a sensation of voice-body engagement when you swap from the unvoiced to the voiced consonant. It's highly recommended to try this in the voice studio and see how your students react. When you use consonants as SOVTs, the most important thing is that the consonant is formed correctly first. So have a look at how your students form sounds and make sure that they are not adding tension in the way that they form sounds to produce sound. Otherwise, all of these interventions are really counterproductive. Now let's have a look at specific consonants and specific functions. So g and k, the occlusion is further back. And this is often used for soft palate activation and awareness, because some students do not realize that they're not lifting their soft palate, or that they might have some tongue root tension. So this g, k, g, k, g, k really helps to relieve that as well. The b and the d is an occlusion at the front of the mouth, and you can use this if onsets are breathy to train coordinated onsets. Now bear in mind, all of these exercises or information comes from Miller, the information related to consonants. So just to get back to the b and the d, if you have a breathy onset, you can use ba instead of ba, which is really difficult to do. So it really helps just for vocal fold closure air pressure slightly building up and then releasing it in a coordinated fashion. Next, we have the nasal consonants, the m, n, and as in sing. Now, all of these consonants have forward vibrations or face vibrations that help you produce a forward sound if you use them as a pilot consonant. So you can use it in resonance balancing. And the added benefit is because they are sustained, you can also use them to feel the natural and appropriate abdominal muscle activation during sustained sounds. So you will feel the natural resistance that the muscles have when you sustain for however long, and you can feel the gradual release of the muscles. Now, s and f and z and v are very useful to training elongation of exhalation, but also freely flowing air, but freeing the air that flows. So f and s are also used if the onset is pressed. So for example, if you have fa, sa, or za, va, with a little bit more of energy. So a rolled R, r, like in Afrikaans and German, generates energy, while an aspirate p and t could be used to facilitate the release of air if pressed phonation occurs, like pa, ta. But it is a little bit touch and go, or you create a breathy sound. So be careful. Be mindful of what your student needs. Then this is quite a nice exercise that I felt for myself. So the voiced and unvoiced th, as in this, and with, as tools for fronting the tongue body. Now this is usually effective when you have a singer who retracts the tongue in an ascending passage. So you can say fa, 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 just to bring the tongue forward and get used to that sensation. The last little bit about consonants. So semi-vowels or semi-consonants, y and w, is really effective to transition from more closure to less closure, meaning from closed to open. So it's an in-between step before you get to your repertoire text. So you can use woo, wee, wa, we, and yeah. Really nice also. Then you can obviously, and you have to combine consonants with vowels as the next step. So you can have, for example, nga, or nga, ka, va, ngi, nga, nga, which is something that Jones advocates for a lot. You can also use for a taller vowel shape, and this is what Brown and Reagan says. So while Miller says that is really good for resonance, I must say that aiming for a taller vowel shape by adding an H, as in might be useful, but it depends on the extent of the internal space and if that is what your student needs. So it's really important to focus on tongue and jaw independence during consonants. So for example, if you have a word such as dentale, there is no tongue and jaw dependence. You just have dentale. So to practice that, you can sustain an N while wiggling the jaw. And then release that. And then it's easy to deactivate the jaw because you've been practicing the concept of freeing the jaw even though the tone is suspended or sustained. Now these examples, all of them can be used outside the context of singing, so you can use it for improving your speaking voice as well. You can also use these consonants for entire sung phrases to gain a specific effect, whether it's more energy or more resonance or more freedom, or you can use them as pilots for passages in the repertoire. And it's important to alternate SOVTs with open mouth singing during repertoire, because you have to gradually transition back to your repertoire at some point, even though it's really comfortable singing on a or a r, you do have to sing those words eventually. On to kinesthetic singing tools. So these singing tools are movement-centered strategies that help to achieve technical goals or tonal goals, essentially by taking the focus off the voice and putting it onto the entire body. And this is very often what we see in inexperienced singers, is that they try to achieve everything up here, but none of the lower body is activated. So kinesthetic exercises are a really good tool for that. Now Reagan says another benefit of this is that these interventions offer a more expeditious approach to a new and replicable sensory experience than ongoing explanations by a teacher. And this is what I referred to earlier on with the master-apprentice approach, where if your teacher demonstrates to you the whole time what needs to be done, it's difficult to gain a replicable sensory experience that you can feel again in the practice room. But using these exercises, you can discover what it feels like for your own body, and then you can reproduce that sound multiple times. So there are a few exercises that you can do and experiment with. You can use gauze, you can use a chopstick, small and large exercise balls, an exercise band, tongue movement awareness exercises, a proper gym squat. And Reagan also says that SOVTs may be used as or may be regarded as kinesthetic interventions because of the vibration and the airflow sensations that students experience. Now there is a disclaimer again. Make sure that your singer can handle whatever you throw at them in the voice studio. It's super important to monitor a singer's athletic abilities and coordination before you assign this exercise, to determine which exercise would be most effective in reaching your goal instead of creating more tension and causing vocal strain eventually. Now the first intervention is using gauze, but beware, it becomes a little bit gross eventually. So only push as far as your student is comfortable, not beyond that ever. Always inquire of a student, will you be comfortable if we practice this or if we do this? So grab that unruly monster. Now there are a couple of ways in which you can do this. So also, before we get to that, this is a method to relieve tongue tension, and it's a way to detect whether your tongue is retracting when you ascend phrases. So have a look. You grab your tongue, and then it's quite actually relaxing. So you grab your tongue, you pull it a little bit out, a little bit to the side, and then release it again. And then you pull it again. But the important part is getting your thumbs underneath the body of the tongue so that you sort of lift and pull. So let's have a look. Oh, and there you hear some South African thunderstorm approaching. So let's have a look. And the tongue with your thumbs, lift and pull. Lift and pull. So experiment and see if this works for you. Very unexpected thunderstorm indeed. So let's try and wrap this up quite quickly. So the next intervention we'll have a look at is using a chopstick. Now you can also use a pen or a pencil, just please clean it before you use it, because this is what you want to do with it. So this is also by Reagan. She has a wonderful book. Let me actually show you this. So that's Plonky, my emotional support donkey. And this is a really, really good book by Reagan. And it has all of these kinesthetic and SOVT interventions. And you can have a look at that. So valuable. Now let's see what she says. So it can be used for resonance balancing and focusing the tone. And, which is really interesting, you can use this to monitor the amount of mouth space or oral space that you really need for higher notes. Because a lot of time you overextend, which causes jaw and tongue and throat tension. Or you don't open at all because you don't know what needs to happen. But if you use this, and I'll show you how to do it now, you can really monitor what you actually need. So let's have a look. Place it between your teeth, but be careful not to bite down onto it and create jaw tension. So you just want it like this. But a better idea is to just let it rest between your lips. And this also depends on the physical creation of your student, what will work better for who. Some students have a really difficult time just doing this. So again, find out what works. It's also really helpful to position the tongue quite forward. Now let's have a look at the space issue. So it really helps to actually not overarch your mouth. So let's have a look at the small exercise ball, also by Reagan. So you have to sit with a noble alignment, then squeeze the ball between the knees when approaching a high note. And this automatically activates the pelvic floor. But now this is really important not to activate the neck, the throat, the shoulders, the abdominal muscles deliberately. The others should anyways not be activated, but it's really important not to make a conscious effort to activate any of the muscles. The pelvic floor is the most important here, and it is activated automatically without you having to instruct the student to do any of that. Let's have a listen. As simple as that. Next up, we have the large exercise ball. This is also by Reagan, and there are 2 exercises that you can do with the large exercise ball. So first, position the ball behind your back against the wall, then move into a squat position. This helps to relieve abdominal tension because you're essentially bouncing against the wall on the ball, and this also frees upper body tension. And by doing the squat and almost leaning into the ball, you engage the appropriate or the correct abdominal muscles naturally without having to give any type of instruction. See, it's so much fun. The second exercise that you can do with the large exercise ball, also by Reagan, is to sit on the ball and rotate the hips in the form of an infinity sign. This releases abdominal tension, it activates the pelvic floor, facilitates continuous airflow, and increases breath capacity. Now this is a little doodle that I hope you enjoy of what the instructions of this exercise might look like. So let's have a listen at what you could do with this. Another exercise you can do is with the exercise band. This entails feeling the gradual increase and decrease of breath energy by pulling and releasing the band. Here's a little doodle of what it might look like to try this exercise, and here is an example of what you could do with it. And ta-da! So a valuable exercise that you can try to make the student aware of the physical movement of the tongue during vowel formation is seen in Rosine 2018, where the tip of the index finger is placed on the middle of the tongue. Just please wash your hands beforehand. And then you speak the vowel sequence a, e, I, o, u a few times in a very natural way. So, a, e, I, o, u. A, e, I, o, u. A, e, I, o, u. It always blows my mind how students have their minds blown when doing this. It's like they don't realize that their tongue can actually move like that. So then you translate this, or you transfer this into singing. A, e, I, o, u. A, e, I, o, u. A, e, I, o, u. A, e, I, o, a, e. Just to gain awareness of tongue movement, because oftentimes the tongue is depressed and pulled down, or it's very tight and it doesn't actually move during vowel formation. This brings us to our last kinesthetic singing tool, the gym squat. Also by Reagan, it aids the execution of a high note, and you have to squat when approaching the high note. It has to really be an energetic and sudden movement. It can't be a half-hearted movement, so you really have to commit to it and make sure that you engage the upper legs. Let's see how you can do this and also take it back to your repertoire. So the combined SOVTs and kinesthetic singing tools are only a few suggestions. There are a million types of combinations that you can try, but at least now you have some information that you can experiment with. Always remember that coordination builds coordination. So for example, you can use the th plus a squat when you ascend in an arpeggio to draw the tongue forward and to keep the body engaged while singing a higher note. You can use s and z throughout a long phrase whilst rotating hips on a large exercise ball so that you can get through the phrase with continuous breath flow from the articulators and from the freedom in the abdominal muscles. You can use v between low and high notes while using an exercise band just to get used to the increase of energy going to a high note and the decrease going back. If you have a high note starting, then you can use a squat and you can use fa, like fa, if, for example, phonation is pressed. But again, this depends on what your student needs. Finally, we have reached the end of this information session on empowering your singing voice. Now, the question we want to answer is, what do you use for what? Now remember, we're taking it back to the technical principles addressed or identified earlier. So we have phonation. Now in this case, you can use a lot of different interventions. Remember, you can use SOVT exercises and kinesthetic singing tools. So let's go through all of them. We have breath management, we have articulation, resonance, and registration. Now have a look at the little cheat sheet of which SOVTs and which kinesthetic singing tools you could possibly use. I'll give you a few ideas. For phonation, free flowing of airflow, unpressing of the vocal folds, or vocal fold closure, you can use straw phonation. You can use the straw glides going up and down. You can use the on and off. And the same is true for breath management. You can essentially use SOVTs and kinesthetic singing tools for all of these, but there are specific ones that we'll highlight. So for breath management, we have the articulatory trills, where you can use the r to generate energy, or you can use a s of the consonants as SOVTs to emphasize or to achieve continuous airflow. Then we can look at articulation. We can use the which is an articulatory trill, the raspberry, to release tension and increase agility. We can have a look at resonance, and there we can use the chopstick to balance resonance and have a forward sound, but we can also use consonants as SOVTs, the and sing to have a balanced forward sound. Then for registration, we can use glides, which are just the most glorious things ever. You can either use a straw, you can either use an articulatory drill, or you can use a consonant to glide with. So this would be z, or back to articulation, you can use gauze to release tongue tension. Very helpful. And the tongue movement awareness exercise in vowel formation. So for correct breath management or breath energy, you can use a squat, a gym squat, to make sure that you have the right type of energy for higher notes. And then you can use exercise balls to help you allow or increase airflow and breath energy. And the possibilities are essentially endless. So this is just an example or a few examples of what you could do. So this is a list of some of the references that I used, all of the references that I used in this presentation, but there are so many more that you can have a look at in my thesis, and I do hope that you can read that. It will be available after the 21st of May online. And please visit this World Voice Day website, which has a lot of information on vocal hygiene, the do's and don'ts, and what to do when you're in trouble. So, I look forward to seeing you at the South Africa NATS Chapter Conference in 2025. If you want to see how I implement these interventions in Afrikaans art songs, be sure not to miss it. Thank you so much for listening. Have an awesome World Voice Day, and remember to empower your voice.